So now what we want to do this morning in this first session is to talk then about the attributes of God. The attributes of God. That is what we want to be concerned with now. The attributes of God. Or you could say God's attributes. Now tell me please, what is an attribute? When we talk about attributes, what are we dealing with? What are we saying? What do we mean? When we talk about attributes, what are we saying? Yes, my friend? First name again?
Esala Daniel.
Daniel Esala, yes.
Daniel 3.
Daniel 3. Yes, Daniel 3. What are we saying?
I think we are saying about what God's works upon the human beings or the universe.
I don't think we're talking about his works. No, we are not. Yes, Daniel 1.
We are talking about the characteristics.
Characteristics, yes? And in fact, sometimes you could talk about the character of God. The characteristics which define God, which explain God. That's what we're talking about here. Are we together?
Yes.
When we talk about your character, we are talking about those things which explain about you. Those things which tell us something about you. And those things about you are true. Those things that are true about you. We talk about somebody who has a quick temper. See, that's his character, isn't it?
Yes.
Say somebody has a very soft attitude towards conflict. That's his character. That's the way he is. So when we talk about the attributes of God, we're talking about those characteristics of God that explain to us, make us understand how he is, who he is. In Swahili we talk about sifa za Mungu, all right? Mambo ambayo ni kweli juu ya Mungu. There are two things about God. Now, I'm going to say to you, dear friends, that this is a very important subject. For this reason, that I fear in our generation today, many people don't know God because they have not been told about the true God of the Bible. Many people today would tell you, for example, that they worship God, yet they don't know that God whom they worship. Now you remember in Acts chapter 17, yes? Paul goes to a city called Athens, and when he's in Athens, he sees people worshiping a God who is not known, and Paul then introduces his gospel to them by telling them the God whom you worship as an unknown God, that God I must introduce to you. I must show him to you. So it is essential, it is important, it is useful that if we will know God, that we must know the true God of Scripture. I usually tell my students that the God who has been introduced to people is not the God of the Bible. He is a God who is the figment of people's imaginations. They have created him in their minds. They have built a throne for him in their minds. And they have worshipped him in their minds. A few days ago I was talking to somebody who has a lot of belief in dreams and visions. And he believes that God is the one giving him those visions. Now I went to the scripture and tried to tell him that according to what you're telling me, this cannot be God of Scripture. This is what the Lord has said in the Bible. Yet he would still say, yes, what you've read is there. I know it is true, but I still believe that what I know, what I'm doing, has been given to me by God. And so you wonder, which God is this person talking about? Which one? Because the God of Scripture has made himself clear, he's made his revelation known to us. Now then, one time I was listening to a message by a man called Paul Washer, and Paul Washer, he made a statement. Actually gave a testimony, not even a statement, he gave a testimony. You understand testimony?
Yes.
And he was saying, one day, one pastor told him, Brother Paul Washer, I would like you to come to my church and preach about the attributes of God. I want you to come and do that. And Paul Washer said to this pastor, no sir, I don't think you want me to do that. And the pastor was surprised. I've asked you to come preach about the attributes of God in my church, and you're telling me you don't think I want you to do that? He said, why? Why do you say that? And Paul Washer said, if I come to your church, my friend, and preach about the true God of the Bible, if I explain him as he is, truly and fully, there'll be nobody left in your church. They will all run away. They will all say, we don't want a God like that. We don't want it. And the reason is people have an idea of God which is not true. It is a misguided idea of God. It isn't the idea of a true God that they are pursuing. And so it is important then that we understand God truly. John Calvin, one of the reformers, towards the end of the 16th century, the beginning of the 17th century, John Calvin said, man's greatest need is to know himself and to know God. Man's greatest need, that which is important for the human being, said John Calvin, the highest attainment of knowledge in the estimation of our brother Calvin, he said, you need to know yourself. And by the way, that's coming after this one, all right? But you also need to know God. Because then and only then can you worship God aright. Then and only then can you have a relationship with God. Because how can you have a relationship with a God whom you don't know? And I'm going to guarantee you, my friends, that as we look around us, there is a lot of expression of God that is not genuine. That God who is represented out there is a fake God. He's not the God of the Bible. In fact, I call him a plastic God. A God who's been created in the minds of the people, and they worship him in their minds in the way that they have chosen to worship him. The God of the Bible is different, my friends. Doesn't it surprise you? Let me just sort of introduce this in a manner of building up a situation. Doesn't it surprise you that today people do anything in the church? Have you attended worship services? Of course you have. And Ruka Kimasai, and what Ruka Kimasai, yes? People jump like Masai. Go down. And people go down, isn't it? And people are having fun. And there comes a time when the music reaches the crescendo and the worshiper says, have fun in the Lord. Burudika katika Bwana, isn't it? And then people let go, they let loose. And you know, people are doing anything that comes to their mind. Anything. So long as they are having fun. Now, was it like that in the Bible? Never. Where do you read Paul, for example, telling people, jump, pande upande, kulia kulia, nenda chini, nenda chini, nenda chini. Where do you see Paul leading a worship service like that? It's nowhere. Isn't it? Surely there's nowhere like that. So the question must be asked, where did we get these things? Where are they coming from? If they're not in the Bible, where are we getting them? Anyway, why do people feel that they can improvise, that they can in fact add, that they can in fact have fun in church? Here it is. Let me give you an opposite example, yes? That I see in the Bible. Cain and Abel come to God. Cain and Abel. The two boys in Genesis chapter 4. And they come to worship. Because in that day you worship the sacrifice and an offering, yes? They come to worship. Abel's worship is accepted. Was Cain's worship accepted? The writer to the Hebrews in chapter 11, verse 4 and 6 tells us that Abel's offering was accepted because he offered it by? That's right. And faith comes by? And hearing the words of? So Abel heard the words of God. Faith was built into him, and then he offered according to what he was told. Cain did not offer sacrifice according to what he was told. God had given them instruction. One obeyed, the other did not obey. What is the story here? What is the meaning? God of the Bible will not be worshipped anyhow. He will be worshipped, he will be praised, he will be approached in the manner that he has prescribed. Do you understand that? It's very important. It's important. You can't approach God anyhow. No. Let yourself loose in the presence of the Lord. That doesn't happen. You can't let yourself loose. You can't. Before the presence of the Lord, you've got to observe yourself. You've got to be careful all the time. Another example is in Samuel. God tells King Saul, go and destroy the Amalekites. Yes? Destroy them completely. Don't leave anything. And then King Saul comes to this place and he wages war. Victory is achieved. And then he decides that he's going to improve the commandment of God. He's going to improve it. How is he going to do it? He says, I will spare the fat cows and the golden things and silver things in the worship. And then when he comes back home, and Samuel tells him, what is that I hear? The bleating of sheep and the moving of cows. He says, my Lord, don't worry, prophet. What I did was, I saw very fat animals that we can give the Lord our God in offering. Was the idea good? Yes. The idea was good. The man wanted to worship the Lord, isn't it? But God will not be worshipped by the way you have chosen. No. God will be worshipped the way he has said to be worshipped. That's the God of the Bible. And I tell you, people don't know him. That's why people do all the things they do. They don't know him. So that's another example. Another example is in Leviticus chapter 10. Now this is a terrible story. Leviticus chapter 10 is a terrible story. People, somebody called Nadab and another is called Abihu. They come to God and they offer a sacrifice. What do they offer? A sacrifice. They offer sacrifice. They say, you're going to give this to God now. And they give God a sacrifice. Was that a good thing or not a good thing? It was a good thing. To give God a sacrifice is a good thing. Their heart, if you like, their mind is in the right place, but they're sincerely wrong. Anyway, what happens is, the fire comes from the presence of the Lord and consumes them. Kills them. God killed those two men at the altar. And then God tells Moses, come near, because I want to talk to you. And Moses comes near, and God tells him, go and tell those people that among those who are called by my name, I will be glorified. Among my people, I will be sanctified. Nobody, in verse 4, I think, of chapter 10 Leviticus, it says, for they offered an authorized fire. God did not tell them. So though it was a good thing, but God did not command it. So hatujiachilii mbele za Bwana. You understand what I'm saying? No, we don't do that. We are careful. Hebrews chapter 13 tells us we must be careful in the worship of God because our God is a consuming fire. Mungu wetu ni moto ulao. God is a consuming fire. So, to know God means we can approach Him appropriately. We can come to Him correctly. Okay? We can come to Him correctly. This is important. I could also give you the example of, I think it is 1 Samuel chapter 16, where David is bringing the Ark of the Covenant from Obed-Edom the Gittite, you remember? And as they are coming to Israel, there are instructions. God has given people instructions as to who is to carry the Ark of the Covenant, how is it to be carried, by who, by what means, and how. It's said, the Lord says so. And so the people are singing. You know, when people sing, sometimes they forget themselves. This is a problem. That's why music can be dangerous in church, right? Because when people sing, they forget themselves. So people sing and they're celebrating and they're coming to Israel. And then you see the donkeys were pulling the cart, kokoteni, the cart, which had the Ark of the Covenant. And as they were pulling it along, there came a place where there were bumps. And what happened? It shook, as if it's going to. And then somebody called Uzzah decided that he's going to help the Ark of the Covenant. He's going to support him so that it doesn't fall. Was he thinking correctly? Yes. Was that a good thing? Yes. Did he mean well? Yes. He meant to support the covenant of God, that the ark doesn't fall, because he saw that it's shaking. Yes, scripture says, and these are the words, the Lord rushed upon him. That's a terrible thing. Kiswahili we would say, Bwana alimwagika juu yake. Bwana, God rushed on him and killed him on the spot. And from that time, David was so afraid that they took a few steps and they offered a sacrifice. If somebody has sinned, Lord, offer him a sacrifice. Because God is to be approached not anyhowly. This is the message I'm bringing to you this morning. Okay? But why do people approach God anyhowly? The answer is the people don't know the God of the Bible. They don't know Him. Why do you hear people pray and say, for example, God, if you don't work this miracle for me, then you are not God? Have you heard people pray like that? It's a very foolish prayer. Let's call it stupid prayer. If He doesn't do it, He's not God. They don't know God, do they? They don't know Him. God does not stop to be God because He didn't do it for you. You are not going to be the first one He did too. You're not going to be the last one. So whether He does it for you or doesn't do it for you, He remains God. Pure and simple. But see, there's this, people don't have the true God of the Bible. Now, we are told the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But you see, today people don't fear God. People don't know Him. You can't fear what you don't know, can you? So the attributes of God is what we want to be concerned with this morning. The attributes of God. Those things that are true about God. Now, in theology, when we talk about the attributes of God, we divide them in two categories. We group them in two groups. Firstly, we talk about those attributes of God which are incommunicable. And then secondly, we talk about those attributes of God which are communicable. Communicable and incommunicable attributes of God. Communicable and incommunicable attributes of God. There are certain attributes of God that are communicable, and there are certain attributes of God that are not communicable. Now, when we talk about incommunicable, by the way, whenever we add the prefix in before a word, we cancel the implication of the next word, isn't it? We say somebody is competent. What do we mean when we say that? Somebody is competent. No, not hardworking. Not at all. Competent. Qualified. Able to do. Alright? We say he's competent in the teaching profession. He's competent. Alright? Competence. But when we add the word in before the word competent, it becomes incompetent. It neutralizes the meaning of the next word, isn't it? So that it becomes negative. So when you talk about communication, that is passing on information, isn't it? Communicating, giving over, passing on. So when we talk about communicable attributes, we are talking about the attributes of God that can be shared, all right? That can be shared, that can be passed on. But when we talk about incommunicable attributes, we are talking about those attributes that cannot be shared. And now, by the way, we're talking about human beings. Now, remember, we read, for example, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, God made man in his own and likeness. Is that right? So that there is a sense in which we human beings bear the image of God. We are like God. Alright? There is something, and we will talk about this in your doctrine of man, and as we talk about creation of man in the image of God. We'll talk more about this. But for now, I want you to understand that we bear God's image. That image is within us. It's on us. There is certain respects in which we are like God. Let me use a weak example, really, and it really is weak. Do you have a child? Are you your child? No, you're not, isn't it? Do you look like your child in some ways? Yes? This is the difference. You are not your child, but you look like your child. I'm only making this distinction because in the word of faith theology, they try to overemphasize this in a sense to create the impression that we are also gods. We are not gods. Alright? We only look like God. But we are not gods. We cannot be gods. Okay. So, in the sense that we bear God's image, that we look like God, there is then inevitably, without a doubt, there will be respect, there will be ways, there will be certain aspects in which we will resemble God. Is that acceptable? Is that something we can all accept? That there are certain ways in which we will be like God, because we are created in His image. Is that right? In His likeness. To that extent, and I'm repeating, to that extent that we bear God's image, that we are created in His likeness, we share in some of His attributes. We share. That means those attributes are found in God, but they are also found in us. All right, in us. That's right. Yet, because God is wholly other, God is not us. God is God, and we're human beings. There are certain attributes of Him that we will never share, that will never be true about us. Does that make sense? Okay. So let us begin with those incommunicable attributes of God. Do tell me, please, what are some of those things that are true about God which can never be true about human beings? Tell me one. Henry?
God is powerful.
God is... Pardon?
He's a creator.
Creator, isn't it? Powerful, you see, there are human beings that are powerful, all right? Like Uhuru Kenyatta is a president and he's a powerful man, is it? So we're talking about, let me just remove that now because so now I'm ready to roll, all right? Okay, so we're talking about the incommunicable attributes. And you're telling me, Kibondori, then, that his creatorship is incommunicable, yes? Will you ever be able to create a human being? No. Let's even say a fly. Will you ever be able to create a fly? Never. So in that respect, that God is creator, we will never be like him. Never, 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 never at all. Never at all. We will never be like God in that respect. He will always be all by himself, alone, and different altogether. Are you struggling to see through this letter? Huh? Are you sure? Very sure? Let me put it there. It's okay. You know, you never say, isn't it? You will always utavumilia too. It's the same. Okay. So then, we say in that respect, God is different from us. Now then there is something else. Tell me, give me another one. There are many, by the way. There are many. Improve what you just said, Mr. Henry, about God's power. Say something there.
So powerful than human beings, can do beyond.
Mr. Humphrey is saying he's omnipotent. What does that mean? That's a big word. We talk about omnipotence, yes? It's a big word there. So what does that mean, Humphrey? That God is omnipotent or omnipotent.
He's powerful.
Not just powerful, no. Powerful, then we would only say God is potent or something, whatever. But we say he's omnipotent. Come on now. Yes? Daniel 3. Yes.
That God is visible.
No, not at all. Potent. What does the word omni mean? Omni? You know, in our parliament, we speak about an omnibus bill. That is a bill that collects all others together. Yes, so.
God is everything.
No, God is not everything.
He's everywhere.
No, that's omnipresent. Again, even from your explanation, see, you can get the answer to this other one. God is all powerful. Thank you very much. The word omni means all. Potent is powerful, isn't it? So whenever you're talking about something omni, you're talking about something that is totally all. So God has all power. And in that respect, even Uhuru Kenyatta does not compare with God. Even Donald Trump, the President of the United States, does not compare with God. Whoever this man's name is, the Secretary General of the United Nations, doesn't compare with God. He has all power. Uhuru Kenyatta, our president, might have some power, but it is not all power. So that's an incommunicable attribute. That God has all power. But you're talking about something. That God is everywhere. Yes? What do we call that in terms of technical language? Omnipresent, yes. Or we could say omnipresence. That God is everywhere at the same time. time. God is everywhere at the same time. Can I be, today I'm here, yes? Can I be in Kakamega at the same time? Because I'm not omnipresent. I'm limited. So that's an incommunicable attribute of God. When you talk about God's knowledge, how do we talk about God's knowledge? How do we talk about God's knowledge? Is it limited? Does God know some things and he doesn't know some things? Pardon? God is not limited. God knows all things, right? Not approximately, but absolutely. And what God knows, he knows perfectly. So he knows all things, not approximately, but absolutely. And what he knows, which is all things, he knows it perfectly. We call that omniscience. Right? Science means knowledge, yes? Omni means? So omniscience means God has all knowledge. He has all knowledge. It's with him. You could talk about the attribute of immutability. 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 Let's talk about that there. Immutability. Something mutable is something that changes. It changes. You are mutable. Human beings are mutable. That means they change. Alright? They change. You are young, you had a better skin than you have today, yes? Now you are older, the skin is growing older, and I'm growing older. I was just looking at myself through the video camera, and I said, I'm growing old. It is true, isn't it? Because we are mutable creatures. Everything is mutable. We are perishing, we are dying off. Today we are here, tomorrow we are not here. Today I think this way, tomorrow I don't think that way. I am mutable. But is God like that? Does God grow old? No, he doesn't. So we say God is immutable. Immutability is the unchangeability of God. God does not change. God does not change. Infinity is another attribute of God that is incommunicable. Infinity. Something infinite is something that doesn't have an end. Something that doesn't have dimensions. I mean, it goes beyond and far and above. So when we talk about God being infinite, we mean he is inexhaustible. God can't be measured, can he? Can you measure God? You can't. He fills the whole earth. That is a language which we call anthropomorphism. Is speaking of God as if we can actually see him. But when you say he fills the whole earth, really he himself says, the earth is my footstool, isn't it? It's a place. So he doesn't just fill the earth, it's just something he can put his foot on. Really, when we begin to think of God, we can't put him to dimensions. We can't measure him. Psalms 139, verse 6 and verse 7, David says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me, I cannot explain it. There was a time back I read in a Christian magazine that somebody attempted to think about God. Somebody did an experiment. He said, I will think about God. And so they began to think about God. Where did God start? How did God exist? You know, he's trying to go back. There came a time in his own testimony that his mind went blank. Because God is infinite. He has no measurements, no spatial dimensions, we say. You cannot quantify God. You cannot measure God. He is infinite. This is the God of the Bible, my friends. He's not the God who can be a bag of chips if you're hungry. People say, oh, God can be a bag of chips for you. God, no, my friends. God is infinite. And this is a very important attribute. By the way, we can talk about eternality as another attribute of God. By the way, you'll read many of these things in the readings which we'll give you, and in the books you'll be consulting. But I'm just giving you a sample of those attributes of God which are incommunicable. Now, what do we mean when we say something is eternal? What do we mean? Endless. Has no beginning and has no end. That's something eternal. And we say God is eternal. God has no beginning and God has no end. Do we have a beginning? Yes. And strictly speaking, in terms of this life experience, we shall have an end, yes? There will be a day we will die. Though, of course, our souls will be launched into eternity, but there was a point at which we had a beginning. So we will never be eternal in the sense that God is eternal. Now, what we're saying then is that when we consider the incommunicable attributes of God, we can summarize them like this: that God has all power, God has all knowledge, and our God never changes. The word we can use to describe all those attributes of God is this. And now I'm just making an application here, right? The word we can use to describe the attributes of God is a word we usually refer to as sovereignty. Sovereignty. That seems to be the word that captures all the incommunicable attributes of God. Now, when we talk about sovereignty, we are talking about the ability and the right of someone to do what he wants, when he wants it, to whosoever he wants it, however he wants to do it. That's sovereignty, isn't it? Now, for instance, is Kenya a sovereign country? Yes, it is. That is why when we went to the ICC, what our president and deputy president tried to do was to plead the sovereignty of the country. When we're in problems, we always run to the sovereignty, isn't it? No, white people, you cannot tell us what to do. We are a sovereign country. When we are killing our people. And the white people say, no, you shouldn't kill your own people. They say, don't interfere with our internal matters. We are a sovereign country. In other words, we can do what we want to do, however we want to do it, to whoever we want to do it. That is essentially what sovereignty involves. Now, with God, the sovereignty is not just a figment of imagination, not just an idea. Sovereignty defines him by reason of his incommunicable attributes. He's a God of all power. Now, why this is important is today you have a God within Christianity, a God who is not sovereign. A God who is not powerful. For example, they say God wanted to save you, but you see, you rejected God. People say something like that. God wanted to do it, but you refused it. In other words, they're saying God may want something and not be able to get it. Why? Because I refused. See what I'm saying? It's like saying Uhuru Kenyatta wants to come to Mumias and then the local chief has refused. And then Uhuru says, sorry, I wanted to come to Mumias, but the local chief has refused. Can that happen? Because he is the president of the country. Now, if God is sovereign, He's the creator, He's omnipotent, He's all-powerful, He's omnipresent, He's omniscient, He's immutable, He's infinite, He is eternal, He is separate, holy. That is to say, He is sovereign. How can He want something and fail to get it? See, that's the problem. But today we have in Christianity a God who can actually want something and not achieve it. You know, God wanted to move in this town. God has desired to move in this town, but people have not allowed Him. And so you hear a preacher say something like, allow God in your life. Allow Him to move. Allow Him. Allow Him. You know, the Pentecostals and Charismatics must be told you are worshiping a different God. Not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible does not need anybody's permission to do that which He wants to do. You know, some time back, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, if some of you have heard of him, he wrote a book and preached some DVD series, and he titled them Earthly License for Heavenly Interference. That was the title of the book. A very catchy title. Earthly License for Heavenly Interference. And what Dr. Miles Monroe was saying is that God needs permission to operate on earth. In fact, he said, God is illegal on planet Earth. It's a terrible doctrine. God is illegal on planet Earth. Shocking, shocking. He's saying when God created the earth, or He created another God, actually God did not create Adam, God replicated Himself. God photocopied Himself into Adam, and so Adam and Eve became photocopies of God. And God now rules in heaven, and Adam and Eve must rule on earth, so that Adam cannot go to heaven, that will be legal, and God cannot come to earth, because that's illegal. So you say heaven needs an earthly license in order to come. And they will quote Abraham, when the angels came and negotiated with Abraham to rescue Lot. Because they say the angels were seeking permission from Abraham to go and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. My friends, the God of the Bible, He will do what He wants to do at the time that He wants to do that which He wants to do. Now, listen very carefully. And here it is. In Daniel, open the book of Daniel, please. Daniel chapter 4, verse 34 and verse 35. Daniel chapter 4, verse 34 and verse 35. And I will show you the God of the Bible. He is not the same God that you see people talk about in the streets and in pulpits. That's a weak God. That's not the God of the Bible. Daniel chapter 4, I'm reading to you verse 34 and 35. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored Him who lives forever. For His dominion is an everlasting dominion, and His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and He does according to His will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of earth. And none can stay His hand or say to Him, what have you done? It's the God of the Bible. He does what He wants at the time that He wants to do it, and no one can hold His hand or even ask Him, what are you doing? No one can do that. But you see, it says there that Nebuchadnezzar realized this when his reason returned to him. And today we must tell the Pentecostals, the Charismatics, and the Word of Faith that their reason must return to them. Because what happens is their reason has left them. And so they think there are some mini gods, and that the God of the Bible needs to ask the permission to do things which He wants to do. That is false. That is not true. So my friends, We're talking about the incommunicable attributes of God. Now, I need to say something just before I close, because in the next session, we want to talk about communicable attributes and some other things there. Now, here it is. Even the incommunicable attributes of God, there's a sense in which they also are communicable. There's a sense, okay? For example, God is eternal, for example. We are not originally eternal, but from the time we are created, our souls become eternal. So that in that sense, we share in the eternality of God. You know that we will never die now. Physically we will die, but our souls will continue to live forever. That soul will either be in the eternal torments of hell or in the blessed joy of heaven. But wherever that soul will go, it will live eternal. So from the time of our creation, which then now emphasizes our creaturehood, we become eternal after that, so that we share in the eternality of God in that sense. God has all power. We have some power, but not all. So there is a sense in which even the incommunicable attributes of God are actually shared in a very limited extent. And that was the point that I think Wayne Grudem makes in his systematic theology. He is quite anxious that acknowledgement ought to be made. Now then, in the next, after the break, I want us to talk some bit about the communicable attributes, all right, of God. And then we will proceed from there. So take a break, please, and then we'll come back, we will deal with the rest. Thank you.